Thank you. We're going to go right. We've kind of changed our agenda a little bit, and hopefully it's pretty efficient, and a little bit more efficient than what we have had in the past. We're going to go right into our public comments. We're going to do the in-person first. How many minutes? 2 minutes. And if you want to watch this way, we've got some signs that will pop up that will kind of help you on the timing. Here, we're going to start off with President Uea Heidi Matthews. Is Heidi here? I did not. Okay. Next, we'll have Virginia Ward with Stephanie Anderson on deck. Sophia Anderson on deck. Virginia? Okay. Sophia? As Sophia is coming up, we want to welcome Sophia Anderson for her public comment. Monica Wilbur, you're on deck. Sophia.
On July 8th, I submitted a grammar request to the USBE requesting all meeting minutes, emails, correspondences, and texts between all members of the Access Advisory Committee. On July 13th, I received a formal denial for those records except for the minutes. The justification for the denial was that the committee members are not employees of USBE. Communications between non-employee agency volunteers are not records subject to GRAMA. Interestingly, the email that I was sent that contained the access meeting minutes had been CC'd to Sydney Dixon, Holly Bell, and 3 others. At the time, I thought nothing of it. On August 31st, I submitted an entirely unrelated grammar request. When I received the request, one of the emails was from Superintendent Sydney Dixon to Patty Norman. It was dated July 13th, same day I received the access meeting minutes. That email reads, FYI, these are being sent as per grammar request. I am not sure who takes minutes, but in the future, summary points would be best. This is more of a transcript than a summary, perhaps a conversation to have with Access, so they know their summaries are public documents. Thanks, Sid. Why is our state superintendent protecting and notifying the Access Committee on why the public has access to what's going on? I want you to know that all parents know now, well, parents that care and are trying to figure out where all of the CRT stuff is coming from, it's coming from the Access Committee. Their only qualification to be on their committee is you have to be a member of a minority group, either racially or, the LGBTQ community. I want to know why this board and our state superintendent is so committed to protecting this group that behind the scenes is ruining our state and harming our children. I want to know. Thanks.
Next, we'll have Monica Wilbur with Jessica Fivish on deck.
To the superintendent and certain USBE members, Academic Integrity Movement and other Utah parent groups feel compelled to reprimand you for modeling the very intolerance you claim you won't tolerate in our children's schools. Since member Natalie Klein was sworn in as board member, you have openly mischaracterized, criticized, and ostracized your colleague for nothing more than representing a worldview at odds with your socially extreme political leanings. Member Klein was elected to represent the families of her district, and her seat at the board is fully equal to yours. Your aggressively antagonistic treatment of her creates the appearance of the USBE being a hostile work environment. You can't possibly engage in this kind of public behavior and honestly expect parents to trust you to turn around and create safe school environments for their children when you can't even pull it off in your own office. If Member Klein has drawn your resentment, It's because she's exposing how you, the board, are very, very bad at supporting everyday moms and dads in helping their kids receive the apolitical, academically focused educations they deserve. Instead, you open the door to emotional and psychological exploitation of kids by expecting and enabling schools to use social emotional learning techniques on students. Social emotional learning exposes students' private lives, emotional needs, and familial belief systems to the scrutiny of teachers, faculty, and other students. Social emotional learning environments reward and celebrate personal attitudes and circumstances that are deemed acceptable because they fit a collectivist progressive outlook. In an SEL framework, schools displace families as the main definer and transmitter of personal and social values. This is unacceptable to parents. Please read the full text of our reprimand of the board to understand why the USBE needs to be checked and balanced through legislative and public pressure. That text is also available at academicintegritymovement.org. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll have Jessica Fivish with Becky Hope on debt.
Okay. The lack of transparency and accountability at USBE is becoming concerning. First, I want you to consider an advisory committee of parents not tied to special interest groups. Our organization, Academic Integrity Movement, can even assist in getting one started. Please reach out to us to get something started and talk. Secondly, after mediation and emails, this office seems to be stalling on releasing grammar requests for communications. What's taking so long? Have you started, or are you stalling while you scrub everything you can? I definitely don't trust what I see happening to be kosher. I'll just leave it at that. And then lastly, last spring, the House and Senate both passed resolutions that tasked you with ensuring no racially divisive material or instruction are in our schools. Instead, you drafted and passed a new rule mandating all districts create and implement teacher training on how to make a culture of, quote, equity at school. You told the public and the legislature you were banning CRT, but you changed a few words and actually installed it as standard culture going forward. That's not what the task was. The legislature is currently conducting a series of audits of USBE. The first was released December of last year, and the second most recent came out in April. The focus of these include structure, internal governance, transparency, and accountability. In the same fashion that the office disregarded the directive from the congressional resolutions, they've also failed to align their mission statement and vision to what the legislature directed for them. I understand there's a discussion on whether there should be a legislative one at all happening later today, but the issue is the office's disregard for anyone outside of the Board of Education. My concern grows when your response to the last audit, signed Superintendent Dixon and Chairman Huntsman, ignores every aspect of the audit. None of the multiple recommendations are addressed, and it's 2 pages of some words on a page that say absolutely nothing coherent to the situation. All of this on top of what you're doing and have done to Member Klein gives a growing number of people great pause to trust anything this board and office does going forward, and has me taking a close look at the new federal funding plan. Transparency and accountability should be made a top priority by this office.
Can you sum it up? Thank you.
If the community loses trust in you, you will continue losing students and funding. You will no longer dismiss the citizens nor elected state leaders and have no recourse. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Becky Hope with Bernadette Brockman on debt. Becky?
Hi, my name is Becky Hope. I have 4 children in public school, and I am here as a mom today. I'm also on the board of AIM. But I just wanted to ask you guys why you think we support Natalie so passionately. We want to have all of your names on here. We want you guys to work with us, not against us. We are not here against you. We know that there are a lot of terrible things happening right now in our public schools. We hear about them every single day. We get people reaching out to us, moms, parents, kids, teachers reaching out to us, telling us all these terrible things that are happening. We would love to share that with you, but we want to work with you. Sometimes the impression you guys give is that you aren't really listening to us. We don't know where you stand. We don't know how you feel. The reprimand kind of made it obvious that you don't stand with Natalie. So if you do, you need to be vocal about that, and you need to say, if you agree with some of the things that she does, you need to say. I want to read from some grandmas that we got from Sophia Anderson. And it's very, very concerning to me, the things that I read in some of these emails. So it's an email exchange between Sydney Dixon and a teacher here in Utah. And it says, "Dear Superintendent Dixon, I'm a secondary educator in Utah. This new idea that teachers should not and cannot ask for personal pronouns is a huge step in the wrong direction. Using pronouns is an important part of the relationship between educator and student. I believe there's a wrong way and a right way to ask for pronouns, namely privately, through something only you and the student see." And then Dixon's response email, "I am in full agreement with everything you say. There are many ways, as you suggest, to allow this to come forward. Asking privately is one." The teacher emails back, "While I comprehend the idea that other students may feel uncomfortable by the idea of preferred pronouns, I can only understand that through a transphobic lens." She just labeled all of our kids who don't want to call other kids by different pronouns as transphobic. Dixon emails back, "It isn't about protecting straight students or the issue of making them feel uncomfortable. 4 of those straight students are my children. Our superintendent, through her own words in many emails I have read, seems to be only concerned about the sexuality of our children and pushing her personal agenda and opinion through onto our children. What about all the other students who thankfully do not have the horrendous trial of being confused about their gender? What about them? Also, any parent with a pulse does not support educators."
Can you sum it up, please?
Yes, I can. "Having private and secret conversations with our children." This is a very slippery slope. And this board seems to be allowing and supporting these things happening. If you guys don't, please let us know. Please let parents know, the public know. You say you're not on social media, get on social media, let us know. We want to hear your support, and we appreciate you, and we want to work with you. Thank you for your time.
And next, we'll have Bernadette Brockman with Melissa Moore on debt. Bernadette?
My name is Bernadette Brockman. I'm with the Academic Integrity Movement. Academic Integrity Movement and other Utah parent groups feel compelled to reprimand you as USBE members for failing to respect, protect, and further the interests of parents in their children's public education, and failing to promote and encourage full and active participation and involvement of parents at public schools, as stated in Utah State Code 53E-2-201. The 2021 audit of the board found that the USBE is not following the mission and vision for public education in 53E-2-201, and instead has created its own competing vision and mission for Utah schools. You are ignoring Utah law on public education and shortchanging students and diminishing parents in the process. Your direction aligns with politicized, well-funded special interest groups, not with the values of Utah families. You are also hiding the board's racial and sexual identity activism by advising your staff and USBE formed Access Committee, Advisory Committee on how to conduct meetings so as to circumvent grammar requests. You've injured public confidence in the board's ability to constitutionally, ethically, and fairly conduct its business on behalf of Utah families. You've enabled special interests to shift the focus of schools from academics, the arts, and sports to social activism, identity politics, and institutionalized discrimination. You're selling out our kids to, quote, experts who only want to use them as a means to their ends. And you're attempting to silence the constitutionally protected free speech rights of Member Klein and parents who are demanding transparency, accountability, and oversight, and who won't be intimidated by your lack of tolerance for ideological diversity of expression. Consider this reprimand as part of the public record documenting your unprofessional conduct and statutory malfeasance. Thank you.
Next we'll have Melissa Moore and Nicholas Willis on debt. Melissa? Okay. Melissa Moore? I'll come back through the list. Nicholas Willis? Thank you. And then Jacob Newman, you're on deck.
Dear Utah State School Board, as an American Indian, taxpayer, and former alumni of Cedar City High School, I want to express my appreciation for Board Member Natalie Klein and her continued diligence in serving her district. She is upholding her oath of office. As you are aware, Article IV, Section 10 clearly states, all officers made elective or appointive by this Constitution or by the laws made in pursuance thereof, before entering upon the duties of their respective offices shall and subscribe the following oath of affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the State of Utah, and will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Natalie's Facebook post was not out of line with your board's bylaws. Natalie Klein is an elected official by the people and is subject and entitled to her own opinion. I believe Natalie was a target by the modern-day cancel culture activists who are spent on destroying traditional American values. Shame on the board for not taking a stand to defend your colleague from these brutal attacks. In response to your board's resolution 2021-01 denouncing racism, embracing equity in Utah schools, I am Native American and very proud of my culture. I personally take offense to the attacks on your letter of reprimand, citing the resolution as an example to shame and say Natalie doesn't respect minority groups. I know Natalie and many of my Native American friends would support her. Davis County School District used the social media post, which was not directly posted by board member Klein, to stir up the pot to directly target the board member. I believe that Davis County owes an apology for stirring the pot, and I didn't believe there was an immediate threat. I would like to caution the State Board of Education to consider the words from a great African-American individual named Martin Luther King. I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Thank you for hearing my thoughts.
Next, we'll have, is this Jacob? Yeah, Jacob Newman and Jonathan Bieharano, you're on deck. Is Jacob? So Jonathan isn't shown, it shows that Jonathan is a Zoom. So we'll come back to him. We'll come back, we'll do our Zoom at the end. Genevra Prothero, then Brianna Hugh.
Good morning. My name is Genevra Prothero. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am a mother of a senior in Davis County School District. I'm trying to teach my family at home how to be kind, respectful, and give them the tools that they need to be successful in the world, not just in Utah. I expect our students in Utah to learn about diversity, inclusion, and equity. Many of our children will eventually be seeking jobs outside of the state because of the cost of living here and the lack of housing. They will need to be able to understand Black history and how to use pronouns that are preferred by others. We are in a bubble here in Utah. We need to put personal religion and beliefs aside to give our students the social skills to succeed outside of Utah. By our students learning about the oppression and trauma that Black people have faced in the past and still face today, it will help everyone achieve a brighter future. Knowledge can lead to togetherness. Black history isn't going away. We need to learn about it. Preferred pronouns aren't going away. We need to learn about it. As our students age into adulthood, they are at great risk for being reprimanded or fired by not addressing a customer, client, or boss with preferred pronouns, or by saying or doing something that is racist. Being Black, Indigenous, a person of color, or LGBTQIA+ is not political. It is crucial to validate the existence of each student by using preferred pronouns for our LGBTQIA+ students and by seeing Black students as they are, and recognizing that the history of their ancestors still impacts them today. Is validating this creates safe space for successful education. I'm wearing the shirt today, it's a pineapple, and that means welcome here. People in the East put it above their door. I want our children to be able to know that they are welcome. I want them to know that they are loved. And I want to thank every school board member that supports this. Thank you.
And next, we'll have Brianna Hugh with Juliet Reynolds on deck. Brianna? Is that another Zoom? My Zoom list is not.
I think they changed.
They changed? Oh, Plan B, okay. Is Juliet on Zoom also? No. Oh, there she is, okay. Juliet.
Hello, my name is Juliet Reynolds, and I have 4 kids that have attended schools in the Murray School District. And I would just like to start with saying, when we know better, we do better. Several years ago, when one of my teenagers came out to me, I knew I needed to change my studies at Salt Lake Community College to learn as much as I could about the queer youth community. This education has taught me how to bring people together and create a culture of community that celebrates differences. It also taught me that the absence of symbols which embrace differences in a community erases identities and perpetuates a culture of discrimination. History was a major component for me in understanding difference, and at the U, I read about the histories of Black and Indigenous peoples of color in America that I had never heard before. I often became overwhelmed with emotion because I couldn't believe that racial oppression had become so deeply embedded in our society. And number 2, I couldn't believe that at 40 plus years of age, this was my first time hearing of most of this stuff. And it had been omitted from my history books when I was young. If we were taught these histories when we were young, perhaps we would not be here in this room divided over difference. Please base your policy decisions regarding pronouns and the inclusion of age-appropriate, accurate BIPOC histories on peer-reviewed research and not on fear. Please reach out to organizations who are experts in their fields. I challenge you to educate yourselves personally on the issues you do not understand. We are counting on you to provide a comprehensive education for all of our kids. When we know better, when we all know better, we all do better. Thank you very much.
Next, we'll have Steve Phelps.
Yeah, how are you guys doing today? First, I
Another
just wanna-
Zoom? Okay, hang on.
Yeah.
We'll list it out here.
Okay.
Kelly Strebel, I believe, is, oh, there. Did I miss Aaron? Okay, we'll do Aaron next. Okay, Kelly. Yeah, Aaron Zoom. Kelly.
Good morning. 2 minutes is hardly time to address the many issues where many USBE members and legislators fail the students of Utah and the taxpayers of this state. Some members of this board, our legislature, and our governor has condoned the worst in education, including child endangerment, socialism, communism, and Marxist ideologies. And if a student dares to speak up, they are persecuted, ridiculed, and singled out for their beliefs and for standing up for their own principles. In other words, their constitutional rights are being destroyed daily. The First Amendment matters. Critical race theory, Black Lives Matter, Common Core, social emotional learning, 1619 Project, Second Step are subjects that fall under the term American Marxism. All of these should now be known as Step 3 and burned and destroyed for the damage that they create and are causing in our schools. We have teachers, principals, and even members here on the USBE pushing this garbage out to underage children. The term prostitution generally is situated around sex, and we see now under social emotional learning, Canyon School District is prostituting sexually oriented websites out to their students without parental consent. The website known as Love is Respect got Canyon District Social Emotional Learning Program put on hold. It should be banned. What CRT really means, criminal racial terrorism, and it is being forced on Utah school children, and the USBE and the state legislature is allowing it and allowing the practice of SSSIT, or state-sponsored sexual indoctrination terrorism, to move forward in the above Marxist indoctrinations. Criminal racial terrorism, state-sponsored sexual indoctrination, and American Marxism must end in Utah schools today. Thank you.
No, so I'm gonna go back before we go to our Zoom participants. I believe Heidi Matthews is on Zoom. There's Virginia Ward. Melissa Moore.
Are you inviting me, Chair Henson? I'm.
Oh, you're on Zoom? Okay.
I am.
No? Oh, that's Heidi's talking? Oh, hang on. Oh, okay. Melissa?
Sorry about earlier. I actually forgot
Okay.
I had signed up to speak. Anyway, so reading what you wanted to read into Member Klein's personal social media posting of the LGB flag, LGTB flag, and then overreaching or overreacting based on subjective feelings, not objective facts, to the point of pretending an actual threat exists to the safety of students at Layton High. Manufacturing fear in children to score political points is emotionally manipulative and abusive. You could have avoided all the drama instead of inviting it, but that would have meant having a constructive dialogue with Member Klein to understand her motivations instead of jumping to irrational conclusions. Your quickness to use inflammatory and deflammatory language in your reprimand to describe Member Klein's only proves the literary truism that people should write what they know about, and you're shown zero indication that you want to know anything about her widely held position that students should be recognized as individuals, not stuck with labels or categorized into boxes and groups, then socially experimented upon, like science lab specimens, or the conviction that students should go to school to learn universal truths, foundational knowledge, and critical thinking skills, not to be divided by race, subjected to sexualized instruction, or experimentally psychoanalyzed for the right attitudes. Thank you.
Okay, next we will go to our Zoom participants, and we'll start off with Heidi Matthews. Are you available?
I am. Thank you. Good morning, board members, and thank you for your service. As I've been traveling throughout the state and listening to our members, there are three things that I just keep hearing that are over 18,000 members of the Utah Education Association are asking for, and that is time, support, and respect. You know, at UEA, we really strive to express our support to you for what you do for public education, as well as serve as critical partners to help shape those policies and perspectives from the point of view of the experts in the classroom. And I would like to express my gratitude for the disclaimer on the public comments today. That, you know, even today we have seen this disrespectful pattern all too often lately, encouraged by some even today against you and our own educators in Utah. So thank you for expecting and ensuring civility and respect. This is especially important today as you work to continue to work to support our educator students and families with regards to R277328 and our most vulnerable students in the guidance of gender identity. Secondly, we shared with you our UEA budget. priorities for the 2022 legislative session. There's much alignment with what you will be discussing today, including significant PU increases necessary beyond the inflationary component to address the needs of students and competitive salaries for licensed and
30 seconds.
personnel.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Okay.
I'll just do a little 30 seconds because you can't see the little card up here. 30 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Again, we are adding to this list, in addition to supporting what you are putting forth in terms of targeted investments for optional extended day kindergarten, investments in at-risk and our rural students, but specifically time directed by our educators for flexible preparation time for all licensed educator, the equivalent of 5 days. I think it's about $54 million in request. It again is just so essential that our educators have time to build those relationships, to do their professional learning, to collaborate with college, to address the COVID challenges, to balance their home and work lives. And they have been stretched so thin, and the pace is not sustainable. And we really, again, appreciate your service and all that you do for students and public education in Utah. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to continue with Zoom. I believe, did we hear from Jacob Newman? I'm not seeing on Zoom. Jonathan Bieharano?
Yes.
You ready, Jonathan? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Jonathan Bieharano. I have 6 kids, and I just wanted to share a positive story. Our kids going back to school, we went to the school building before it was opened with some supplies, and we walked past the new principal there. And I was so happy to see the kids coming back into the school and things starting up again. And it was wonderful to be able to go see our new kids teacher and be like, here's everything that you wanted on your wish list. Here you go. And it's kind of sad to hear on the other end what teachers is not on their wish list being sent to them. No one asked for this. No one asked to accuse teachers of teaching indoctrination and Marxist concepts, and it's sad to see the results of this culture conflict. My family is from Peru. I went to school here in Utah, and I remember going to college and being able to learn things like cultural education, and being able to be exposed to, hey, there's other people out here that are like my dad, and it was nice to go to college and be around those people and kind of have diversity. And I feel like that's something that is missing, that people don't recognize that how it is to grow up like that. And all viewpoints matter. And I cannot stress how important it is to not try to change policy to force your will on other people.
Jonathan,
But
30
one
seconds.
thing-
Jonathan.
One thing that I've seen, thank you, is that when we're positive, I know there was a positive post on a board member's page asking for the good. That changes hearts. We can't legislate or mandate policy to force people's opinions on us, but we can love them. That's the best that we can do. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Brianna Hugh.
Yes, thank you. I'm a parent and an educator and an active member of PTA, SCC, and DCC. As the parent, I want to remind all of us parents, educators, administrators, and school board members that while there may be multiple perspectives on any given issue, there should be only one side, the student side. If what we do doesn't improve the quality of education and the caliber of students in our schools, we are focusing on the wrong side. When we focus our attention on the rights of the adults involved and not our responsibility to first care for the whole child, we have forgotten our purpose. We are modeling for our students how we address differences, how we handle difficult emotions, and how we cultivate civil and respectful conversations with each other. Our students are watching what we do and how we treat people. Our actions impact others and most assuredly impact the students around us. When we spend our time targeting teachers and LEAs who choose to be inclusive and welcoming in their classrooms, we impact students. When we focus our attention on perceived malicious intentions of teachers and encourage what amounts to witch hunts, students are negatively impacted. When we accuse educators of indoctrinating students because they encourage students to see beyond their current perspective, we are not preparing students to understand and respect each other or prepare them to be adults and global citizens. Our job is not to create replicas of ourselves, but to ignite, encourage, embolden passion, grit, and empathy in our students so they can tackle the problems of their world. We have to step outside of our own egos and see students, listen to students, and believe that our students will be better than us.
30
we do this by
seconds.
making sure that our classrooms are safe, welcoming, and full of belief, that our students are capable of higher level thinking and higher level caring. We do this by respecting the expertise of teachers and honoring the experience of parents. Let's trust that educators know their content area and are expertly trained. Let's assume that schools and districts have the best interest of students at heart. Let's put the needs of students, all students, above the need to be right and the need to ensure that our own perspective is the only one that triumphs. What should triumph in the end is compassionate, healthy, and curious students. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Steve Phelps.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to first of all start with a disclosure. I am here only representing myself and not the Special Education Advisory Panel. I followed this debate around CRT, SEL, and those type of things. And I think, first I want to thank you guys for your service and your strength. We've kept many positive motions going the right direction because the board members have been focused and committed to those, and I appreciate that. I know it's been a long year in regards to that stuff. One of the things recently we saw posts about the Alpine bus driver in this instance there. The same people who are arguing that we don't need to teach politics in school rushed to his defense, saying it was okay for him to do it. Why? It's because they agreed with it. This isn't about politics. This is about what you agree with and what you don't agree with. It's not about that. It's not about brainwashing kids or anything. It's literally about turning schools into a political machine, which I think everybody should be able to agree that that's not the purpose and the intent. As an educator, I've received numerous early morning phone calls over students committing suicide. Many of those are because students struggled. Many of those students were LGBTQ students who didn't feel accepted or belonging in school. They didn't have anywhere to turn. Many of those students can't turn to their families. They can't turn to their church leaders because they get demeaned and attacked by those people because it's against their beliefs. Am I the best person to do it? Maybe not. But in many ways, teachers are sometimes the only person the kid has the relationship with. The current guidance that I saw is very troublesome to me because it puts me in a position where
Steve,
can't
30
help
seconds,
kids.
Steve.
So, yeah, it puts teachers in a position where they can't help kids sometimes without being that. And even then, it says if we do help kids, I believe it calls it a district decision on employment. Essentially, I believe teachers need protection. We need the same sort of Good Samaritan laws. If we're trying to do what's right, we need to be protected because we tried to do what's right. For that student, and sometimes that does go against some other beliefs. So again, just want to really thank you guys and point out that the students do need people to turn to. Many of our students are isolated and troubled and need additional help, and sometimes teachers are the only people who they have the relationship with to provide it. So thank you.
Next, we'll have Aaron Bolen.
Hi, thank you for letting me comment today. I'll get right to the point. Unfortunately, I'm quite ashamed with the public education system in Utah. The board bylaws, I believe, are absurd in the extreme. They are not replicated in any other public elected body in Utah. You make yourselves out to be kings that get to decide what is and is not acceptable opinion for other board members to have. And the UEA and some on the board are so incredibly afraid of accountability of the public education system that you seek to keep what is being taught and promoted in schools a secret at all cost. Board Bylaw 4, subsection 2 says that if there's an issue at a public school that is brought up to a board member, that board member must fully anonymize any evidence of the issue. But tell me then how we were supposed to confirm the issue is even real. The UEA and others want to pretend like nothing inappropriate is ever taught to our children in our schools and that we shouldn't try to do anything to address it, because that would be mean. They want nothing more than to instill doubt in any evidence presented and claim that it is fake. Without knowing what school and what teacher caused an issue to occur, nothing can be done to remedy the issue. That is, unless we want to trust the process that the board has in place that has done basically nothing to address these issues thus far. Bylaw 411B states that a board member
30
must use a
seconds.
disclaimer before
Aaron,
publicly
30.
stating an opinion. This is hilarious. No other elected body does this. You basically muzzle anyone elected to the state level position by requiring them to state the obvious. The board is not one person, but you pretend that it is and that it must be. In Bylaw 12, you subjectively prohibit anyone from injuring the good name of the board. You do not have a responsibility or the right to control your fellow board members and what they say. And might I add that none of you have the responsibility to control what people say in response to what you say. But you claim that in your reprimand, you claim that your board members have a responsibility for what is commented in response to anything that they say. I want to assure you that the board does not have a great name, and it is not because any one board member, but it is because you are not protecting our children from bias and activism in the classroom. Just a few weeks ago, students at Harriman High went on a privilege walk so that they could be classified.
Aaron, can you finish up? Your time is up. Aaron,
Yes.
please. Thank you.
The reason that teachers feel empowered to be activists in the classroom is because you empower them and you silence anyone who tries to fix it. Please help us and protect our children. Thank you.
We have a couple more public comments. Kimberly Reed. And Clustina, you keep popping up on my screen, but I got you last on the list. So Kimberly Reed. Okay, Clustina, I hope I get your name right. Clustina Mahone Reynolds.
Yes,
You're on
thank
Zoom.
you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I want to thank the board for giving me an opportunity to speak here today. Greetings to our board chair, members, superintendent, and associate superintendent. My name is Dr. Clustina Mahan Reynolds, and I am the chair of the Access Committee. I wanted to take this time to tell you who we are and what we do. Our acronym stands for Advisory Committee on Equity of Educational Services for Students. We are a committee of 15 diverse members of color and not of color who were interviewed and chosen by the Utah State Board of Ed to support the equity of educational services for students. As per policy 5001, we, the Access Committee, is charged with advising the board regarding the board's efforts to support equity of educational services for all students, providing information and consulting with the board at all levels of the decision-making processes as education decisions are formulated, establishing and maintaining contact with persons, groups, and associations having an interest in the welfare of students who are at risk for underachievement, and soliciting feedback and remaining knowledgeable and informed relative to public and private interest in education. I would like to leave you with a few thoughts. I implore that as we continue to be involved in the educational decision-making processes for our students, we first and foremost put our students at the center of all decision-making. Number 2, seek to understand and seek to be understood. And number 3, lean in and listen to each other with the understanding that we have more commonalities with one another than we think. Thank you.
I think we've got everyone covered. I think it was Virginia Ward that I think this concludes our, okay. Thank you. And I just want to remind the public that there's a process to sign up for public comment, and then we also receive comments in writing also. So thank you for your attendance. You're welcome to stay through this meeting. Next, board members, we're going to move to our Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind portion of our board meeting. The first item up here, and I do want to excuse our the superintendent, Joe Coleman, for the schools for deaf and blind. Well, I want to excuse him from being here in person, but he is.
Oh, well, I'm never missing a meeting again because I didn't intend to be that gigantic in the meeting.
So you're staffed here, and we welcome you. The first item on our agenda here is under 3.1, Carl Empey, our finance director. This is an actionable item. approving the Department of Health Medicaid contract. Director Empey, you want to brief the board? And
I do. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and board members. It's a pleasure to be here. We have in front of you the standard State Department of Health Medicaid contract that they issue to all LEAs and charter schools to reimburse for Medicaid eligible services that we provide. We've had Zach Christensen on your staff review it, and also Brian Quisenberry review it and gave us comments. So we would propose the contract is for a 5-year period of time. The dollar amount's $16 million, just in excess of $16 million for the services that we'll provide. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
okay, it's also in our packet. Any questions or comments for Director Empey? Seeing none, I seek a motion that the board approve the Department of Health Medicaid contract.
So moved.
And the second, Member Cannon, discussion. Seeing none, the motion before the board is that the board approve the Department of Health and Medicaid contract. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next, we still have Director Empey here. This is an informational item. It's a monthly budget update.
Okay, good morning. The budget report is for the first 2 months that ended August 31st. We are financially solvent. We're off to a good start. Our inflows and transfers from the state totaled $7.6 million. Our expenses were $3.8 million, leaving us a balance of about $3.8 million. The state was generous, as you may recall. We had requested $900,000 to buy property adjacent to our Mill Creek campus. They funded that July 1, and we also requested $450,000 for a new portable at Mill Creek Elementary, and they funded that on July 1. So that's in part why we have such a large surplus of revenues and inflows over our expenses. The number of students that we served at the end of August was 2,575. Our land grant enrichment fund balance totaled $727,785. Our donated funds were $273,346, and our education foundation balance is $1,226,185. The report behind that is the budget status report that gives all the supporting detail for those numbers. Another report, just to bring it to your attention, is our enrichment fund projects. You may recall we come and bring a list to you that you review and approve. This is using the monies that the school receives from the land grant trust fund. The balance that you had approved was $1,426,000 or $20,000. We've added one additional item on this list, and I'm going to have Associate Superintendent Michelle Tanner talk about this. This is the school community land grant of $26,000. We've worked with your office, and they agreed that we could use our advisory council to oversee these funds. So I've added that down at the bottom of the list of the enrichment fund projects, and that's why they now total $1,446,000.
Is it on? Let's see. I'm not.
It needs to be read.
Hang on.
It has to be read instead of right.
It was on. I can turn them off.
How's that? Is that, no?
No.
It's all good. We'll just, well, no, no.
So I can't turn it on.
I can do it.
We have another control here.
Oh, you did. Thank you.
Yeah, before we get to your presentation, let me see if we have any questions on what Director MP presented so far. And we do have one question or comment. Vice Chair Belknap?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. How does your 2,575 students compare to last year's amount?
The number is increased by about 180 students. So we've grown dramatically.
And may I follow up?
Yeah, follow up.
And where is that growth mostly?
We're seeing it down Washington County is a lot of the growth. We're seeing it down in our Springville campus with the new school. Every year, the grades move up, and so we pick up additional students. And we're seeing it here in Salt Lake and in our Ogden campus, so statewide.
Thank you, Chair. May I continue?
Yeah, additional?
Yes. I need clarity on this community council land grant. Are you talking about community council and your advisory council being one?
Yes, and that's what I'll have Associate Superintendent
Oh,
Michelle
that's what she's going
Tanner
to talk
about that.
Okay, then I have one more.
Okay.
Okay, and you have some additional money. How are you getting the portable for the Washington County area? What happened there?
That was donated to us. We've transported that down. It's kind of been a series of unfortunate events. As they were hauling it down, one of the pieces, the steel structure, became weakened, and they had to pull it off the freeway and call welders and weld it up. It's now down at the campus. Unfortunately, they had to rebuild a roof on top of it, and there's mold and mildew that they are mitigating in it right now. It's just like, if anything could go wrong, it has gone wrong with that portable. You're welcome.
But it's good to have it all happen at once instead of discover it a little bit later after
Exactly.
you're in it. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I think, on that particular event.
There is.
I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. We'll turn the time over to Associate Superintendent Tanner.
Good morning, board members. I'm just going to quickly and briefly describe what's happened with that. We have our school community council we've had for a number of years, and it has been extremely difficult to find people to serve in those capacities. Plus, we serve across the state, so we have to try and find them across the state. So we realized and recognized that our advisory council met the requirements of the council members, and they meet on a monthly basis. So we talked to the school land trust, Paula Plant, and they said that certainly the board could also serve in that capacity, in that role. So instead of having to create this body, we were able to utilize a body we already have in existence. And the reporting's still the same. We still have the same goals. All the other requirements are the same. It's just the body that's going to be having the discussions with that.
Oh, do you have a question? I do too. So,
Okay, do you want to go ahead?
yeah, a question I have is, so when they're acting in, when the advisory council is acting in that other role, do you run your meeting a little bit separate, like they are wearing a different hat at that time, or is it just blended? I think it's important to have it separated, but I was just curious how that's working.
Yeah, well, this was our first meeting we had, our last meeting. We took a pause and explained that this is now a new role, and we had Paula Plant come in and explain what that new role was and what's going to happen going forward, and that we will have different roles. So our next time we would meet about that, or have to meet about that, will be in January, and so we'll have a separate piece of the meeting that's focused on that.
Okay.
Chair, I could also.
Okay. Yeah. If you can add to my question.
Also, that $26,000 would definitely be, we would be talking about that separately. We would make sure that they were understanding they were talking about that $26,000, not just making it a part of all of the funding that they were discussing.
Okay, so who just spoke was Associate Superintendent Patton, but so that is being separated. Vice Chair Belknap.
No, I took off Molly's on.
Oh, okay. Member Hart.
Yeah, you said all the rules and laws. Does that include everything on the website for transparency across the state, since you serve such a broad area?
Yes, everything is posted on the website. All the school land trust rules that we have to post it, have open meeting laws and what we can discuss, what can be approved for those purposes of those funds. That's why he set aside a separate line item so that we don't mix those with the other funds.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay. Vice Chair Belknap?
I still want to hit on this because we've had this discussion, and Community Council has really strict and laws about who's on the council and who represents, and that you have to open that up to all parents. And your, I forgot the name. Your other
Advisory
group-
council?
Your advisory council, I was going to say council, and then we get confused. Your advisory council has very strict pieces that they have to feel. And this doesn't necessarily open it up to any member who wants to be on community council. So I'm really struggling with this because we have students all over the state and we still have to follow those laws. So help me how we're not doing that.
Okay.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, Superintendent Coleman.
Thank you. Board Member Belknap, you're absolutely right. That was the main concern that the advisory committee to the student land trust funds had. And we brought that to them. They made the recommendation and we brought it to you as a board to approve. And what the board did to kind of mitigate that concern was you added parents to the advisory council. So we now have parents on the advisory council also, instead of just the other advisors that we had previously.
Jeppa? No. Okay. Member Cannon?
Thank you. Just a question to help me understand. I know that there are specific parts of the land grants that are designated for schools for the deaf and blind, and you get that money. I'm wondering when the money comes from the permanent fund, it's distributed on a per student basis. In addition to what you get for the deaf and blind schools, do you also get that per pupil amount? So you get both of those things to fund. And is this 26,000 the total of those?
Yes.
That helps me understand. Thank you very much.
Okay. Member Oh, yeah. Okay, we got to turn, and then.
Push it once and then push it again. Push it
And
again.
then, okay, wait.
All right, that should scare us all that took so long for me to figure that out. I will say too that with the advisory council, the parents, everybody is welcome to apply for that as well. It's not, it's not subject to just one group of parents, a parent of the blind, a parent from the school for the deaf. So.
Okay. Member Norton?
And getting back again to that advisory council, do you run them? It's kind of back to, I guess, to Vice Chair Belknap's question about running them as separate entities. Do they have separate leadership? Could you be elected as the chairman of the community council and yet somebody else is the chairman of the advisory committee? Or are they just run as one?
Joel, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, no, when we proposed this to the board and you approved the rule, the whole concept was to allow the advisory council to serve as the community council for the purposes of approving this little tiny amount of money that we do every year, the $26,000.
Did you have any follow-ups? Did we have anything more to add on this? Okay. Next, we'll go to item 3.3, which is our review of USDB's fiscal year 23 legislative request. Superintendent Coleman, are you taking point on that? Okay.
I am. Thank you very much. Board members, this is a little different this year, slightly different than normally. At this time, we have everything completely buttoned up for you. And we do for 2 of our 4 funding requests this year. But the other 2, because they concern buildings, it was impossible for us to have the numbers nailed down right now. We're working with the State Department of Facilities and Construction Management, of course, like we always do to get this done. But it's okay. We've been, that was not a Jedi mind trick saying it's okay, you don't have to care. But what I mean is it's really good news because we've got some exciting things to report for those two. So I'll just go through them one at a time. The first slide you have in your packet concerns our increased funding for our teacher educators. And as you know, this isn't really a funding request like others. This is sort of anticipated in state code, and we're required to submit a number based on the weighted annual salary average increase for all the districts across the state. And so that this year, that number came out to a 4.1 something. I don't have it in front of me, but a little bit above 4% increase. Yeah, for our educators. And thank you for putting that slide up there. I appreciate that. And so that ends up being a $1,070,000 increase. That is an amount in code. We anticipate that'll happen in the funding bill that funds all state employees, and that's how it usually works every year. You have any questions on the first slide?
I'm kind of curious with what's happening in the state government right now is the labor market right now is going kind of crazy right now, where it used to be a lot of the private sector wants to try to get into the government part of it, and right now the private sector's poaching, I guess, pulling away, and even on the private side, a 4% increase or even a 5% increase just doesn't seem to be in the cards for what's happening on the private side. And I'm just curious if you've heard anything in this funding process of how the state might mitigate trying to hang on to employees that are employed through the state. So have you,
That's a
have
really
you heard
good
anything
question.
at all?
Yeah, well, yes. And actually our second slide will address that. But before we move to it, when it comes to our teachers in particular, USDB has always lagged by a year or two because our salary increases are based on the weighted annual salary average, the WASA adjustment for across the state. And so in previous years, our teachers have gotten significantly bigger increases, even when the other districts haven't, because it lagged their big increases. So we're just a cycle or two behind them usually. And in this case, this reflects what happened last year for those districts, and we will request January, in the legislative session, so it will take effect next year for our students. And that's what you're seeing there. But I do have to say our teachers are well compensated, and they're guaranteed in the state, the same law, they're guaranteed to be in the top 10 of the districts in the state. And so there was one year when they got a 10% increase because they had dropped out by this formula. And so they're held harmless that way. I hope that explains that.
Thank you, Superintendent. Is there any other questions on this slide? Seeing none, please continue.
Okay, thank you. The second slide addresses our other employees where we have critical needs. And it's combined into one slide between the FTE requests and then the increases for our lower entry level classified employees. So if you may recall last year in the legislative session, in a special session, we went back due to all the COVID meetings and convenings that the legislature had. And we requested early on 1.4 million. It was declined because of what happened with the budget issues. Then we went back later in a special session. They actually approved more money for all the schools, but USDB was not included in that. So we went back to them and brought that to their attention, and they gave us half the money we needed. So we got about 700,000 of the 1.4 million that we needed for new FTEs last year. And we've made do. We've done what we had to. We have not filled certain positions that we needed to, but we've gotten by, and the kids are being served in most areas the way they should. Actually, they're being served the way they should in all areas, but some positions are just kind of understaffed, I should say, and we're making do whichever way we can. Anyway, this year coming back, our request for new positions is 1.29 million, and that includes some that we did not get before and a few more that we need now due to the growth that we mentioned before, especially in Washington County, but also some statewide where the districts, for example, are growing also. And so when one of those districts needs a new interpreter or a new teacher of the visually impaired or something, we have to come up with that person to comply with the board rule, the 3% rule that you're aware of. So anyway, in addition to the FTE needs, which is statewide, 9 educator positions, 1 additional PT, physical therapy, to comply with those IEP needs. We have 2 in the state now. This will be our 3rd, and the 2 have very high caseloads. And for about 3 years, we've postponed adding an assistant director for the blind outreach director, but that person covers the entire state. And Susan, can you remind me how many educators he supervises currently?
Yes, so he has 19 TVIs and he has 12 orientation, so 19 teachers of the visually impaired across the state, and then 12 orientation and mobility instructors.
Okay.
He's serving this year. We served 377 students with both visual impairments for O&M and teachers of the visually impaired with 1 director. So he is spread quite thin.
Yes. So, and trying to get all around the state and do those teacher evaluations, give them the support they need, mentor the new teachers and all of that. We actually assigned a couple other teachers part of their caseload to be a lead teacher temporarily, but it's just not optimal. So we're finally going to add that assistant director position. And that includes the 11 FTEs essentially that go into that $1.29 million. And then in addition to that, here's the critical needs that board member or Chairman Huntsman was talking about. There are some critical increases where we, as you are well aware of in the job market right now, we are really struggling to fill paraprofessionals, custodian, and cafeteria staff. And we're looking at giving them $1 an hour raise. It's not even significant. I mean, it's significant to them, but it's compared to the job market for them, we're just trying to compete with the other school districts and get some of these people in the door. And then 44 deafblind interveners, we actually were facing being out of compliance with IDEA last year. And to avoid that, we used one-time money, which we almost never do, to fund an increase for those deafblind interveners. And it actually worked perfectly. We filled those positions that we needed, and that was a great relief to us. And so, as you know, it's not great financial practice to be funding ongoing positions with one-time money. And so we're going to request that the legislature funds that increase. And together with those 71 paraprofessionals and entry-level staff and the deaf intervener increase, that only equals about $288,000. So the total IFR here on this slide for personnel to help us compete in this world that we're in right now comes out to 1.594 million ongoing. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions on this slide? I'm not seeing any, but I do have a concern that through this next legislative session, as we get closer to it, and that the reality, I think reality is going to hit us, and I think that $1 an hour is not going to cut it. But hopefully we kind of keep an eye on this so that we can adjust that accordingly to have those critical support services. So I know it's a placeholder and kind of a starting place, but I'm pretty concerned about what's going to happen with public education with the private demand that's happening there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute.
I'm always too quick. I
So
just
state your
wanna-
title, so when we do it.
So I'm Susan Patton, Associate Superintendent for the School for the Blind. One of the issues we have with our paraeducators, which we do know that paraeducator hiring is low all across the state in every school district. But one of the things I think is very unique to USDB is the fact that our paraeducators even have to have more expertise than paraeducators in local school districts. We require more of them. We require more training. So when we're not paying what other local school districts are paying, it's difficult for us to recruit because they are required to do more and have more expertise as far as with the students and instruction. So I just wanted to make that clear that is one of our issues as well.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other comments. Superintendent, please continue.
Okay, thank you. So the next two slides have nothing to do with ongoing personnel costs. They're both building related. And as you know, board members, the difference between USDB and other school districts is we don't have property taxes. So every time our building needs come up, we don't have the luxury of going to our ongoing facility funding or bonding or anything like that. And so that's why you're seeing these each year when they come up. These slides are not complete. They will be complete in your November meeting. And that we've talked to the finance staff and the governor's office and also the LFAs, and they're aware of that timeline, and so they're okay with it. But the only thing that's not complete is the actual financial number. So this first one has to do with the Salt Lake High School building, where we, as you're aware, we got money last year from the legislature to procure land. It was very difficult. We ended up with a piece of land that was not one we originally anticipated, but it's actually going to work out better. It's perfect. It's right next to adjacent to our property in the back corner, the northwest corner of our campus there in Salt Lake in Mill Creek. And it's a third of an acre. And so we anticipate having the numbers complete before your next meeting. And we have actually hired an architect. We put out bids. We hired someone to help us with that actual study as soon as the property closed. In fact, we were already interviewing them before we even closed on the property. And as soon as the deal closed, we had them in there looking at it and described our needs. And so just on the back of the napkin, the architect is telling us that he's thinking it could be $7.5 to $9.5 million, something like that. But he's going to get us the specific numbers. And he is also working with DFCM. So the state is involved in this building process as well. And what that will do is it will give us the classroom space we need for our high school kids. Currently, if you remember, they have been at other high schools where they were actually not thriving very well. And so we've pulled them back to our campuses the last couple of years, and they're doing amazingly well. And they still go to those other high schools for elective classes, auto shop or specialty classes, and it's great. So they have the best of both worlds. But as a result, they're meeting in our office spaces and our conference rooms, and some with the elementary school kids. And so it really is appropriate. And that's why we made this request. So this will just be for the construction, since we already have the land, and the details of that are on that slide. We will have an exact number in your next meeting on that requirement number there. We've just put a range at this point.
I'm not seeing any questions or comments at this time, but Superintendent, can you speak to, I've got one, but can you speak to, I mean, we as a body, we're different than of course, we are different than a school district. As we are involved in our buildings, can you speak to the role the DFCM plays in this space? And just briefly, we could spend hours on actually what the role is.
Yeah, we have a little bit more of a complex process because of who we are as a state component unit, and we actually use state construction division to help us with any leasing or building of properties or major renovations over $1 million. So they came in and did a new roof on our JMS building a few years ago, for example, and they do our parking lots. But other than that, we do all of our maintenance and updates internally using carry forward money each year, whatever we don't spend out of our normal budget. for this purpose, they will be the construction managers. They actually helped us with the contract to purchase the land, and they will help us all the way. They're doing a CVE right now so that we can get an accurate estimate for the legislature. And they do all of that work, so we don't have to go out and contract with everyone to do that. And then they hire the professionals that work directly with the contractors and so forth. So Joel Coleman or Susan Patton or Michelle Tanner don't have to be construction experts.
Thank you. Member Lear, you have a question or comment?
I did. I just wondered, for anyone, superintendent or the associates, how many high school students are we talking about? This, I realize the horse is sort of out of the barn. The board approved the purchase of the property, but that amount just is kind of stunning. And how many students are we talking about serving in that high school?
Yeah, so Superintendent Tanner, you can probably answer that better than I can.
Yeah, we currently have about 25 students and 25 to 30 students in our middle school. So it's not just high school. It will also be middle school and high school students that will be served in there.
So 25 middle and high school, or 25 middle and then additional high school, or?
Between both of them, we're sitting at about 40.
And 40 students total, and they aren't even attending the school full-time. What you said, or at least the superintendent said, they'll take certain classes from other
They
high
take the
schools.
classes that are, for example, auto shop and motive would be extremely expensive for us to build for their equipment, or the classes that we can't support through the number of teachers we have. They'll take some classes there. Or if there's a student that desires to be mainstreamed for part of their time. So we'll have some that will go more times than others. And then it should also be, I should probably bring to the attention, a lot of these students need a lot more intentional services that we have in these placements. They have other needs besides just being deaf. The ones that are more mainstream tend to have less. They are deaf students just functioning as they choose to in whatever fashion they want to, depending on how they want to access communication. So yeah, they will all be served in that building. I'm sorry what happened. They're all going to be served in that building, and then some of them go out at different points at time for an elective class, depending on their needs.
Chair, can I add a quick follow-up?
Yes.
So can you give me a guesstimate, an educated guess about how many of those students would be in that building full-time versus part-time?
All of them are going to be in there more than 3/4 their time. I can tell you that. All of them are going to be, there'll be some elective classes they go out for. I wouldn't even say sewing, because we do sewing, we do science. But if there is a specific class that a child is interested in, some automotives, we can't do that one. We can't do the ones that are maybe your AP classes. We probably would send them back for an AP class, but they're going to spend more than 3/4 their time in there.
So interestingly, some of the classes that are also most expensive for traditional schools.
Yes.
And what about things like theater and music and things like that?
Theater and music we do. We do with our students. Our students have tried, you maybe remember a while ago, we were involved with the Shakespeare Festival, and that didn't turn out to be very successful for our students. So we do theater with other deaf schools across the nation now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I will piggyback a little bit on that by saying we're also providing more office space in this building. Currently, we're using classroom space in our elementary school for some of our related servers that are required by kids' IEPs. And so they're doing therapy. We have dividers so the classroom is using like an L shape, and we've carved out a little corner with dividers for our adults to use with the kids as they bring them in one at a time for their services. So this will also provide office space and a little bit of storage space for our facilities department that needs some of that. So it's not all classroom space, but most of it will be.
Okay.
Okay, the last slide is actually the most exciting one for me. And this is, as you heard about our portable that we're taking down there, and it was given to us. And I guess you get what you pay for sometimes, but we're still grateful. That will provide about 4 classroom spaces. Our need is about double that. And with the growth in Washington County in the out years, we're looking at much more than that. So what we did, instead of just running off and deciding what we needed, we went down and we met with Washington County School District. The unique thing about our facility there is, with these other facilities and campuses of ours, we serve many school districts and entire regions. With the St. George property, it's really only the St. George, the Washington District kids, maybe a few from Iron County, but generally it's all their kids. So I went to Superintendent Bergeson and said, tell me what I need to know. Tell me what you see, because we're serving your kids. And we, in fact, they're the ones that use this phrase. They said, we agree. We believe we are us. We're all together on this. So they talked to us about their building program and how robust it is, and how they open up 2 or 3 buildings a year because Washington County growth, and they're projecting over the next 20 years, it's not going to really abate very much. And so we said, what do you need here? And they gave us the land behind one of their elementary schools at Bloomington to put the portable on. And they said, this is not going to be sufficient. We said, well, what do you need and what can you do? So let's partner together. So what they have agreed to do is give us the land that we will need for this, and also to provide all their construction services. They actually have in-house architects, and they do tilt-up concrete buildings, which don't sound nice at first blush, but they look great and they really work for them. Larry told me, he said, Joel, I think we build our buildings for about 25% less than any other district in the state can. And because we do this so often, we have a system and we know exactly what we're doing. Inside, the buildings look great. We toured them, we've worked there, and we have currently classrooms scattered throughout their district, which of course is a lot of transportation daily, and we're going to need at least twice what our current portable will handle for the next couple of years. But what he said was, we'll do all the construction services and everything. So all you need to do is request the money for the buildings, which we can build a lot cheaper too. We went to DFCM and told them that, and kind of asked them if that was okay as a state agency, and they said they could work with that totally. So our request here will be for about a 10 classroom building. We think that will handle the current 6 or 7 classrooms that we need, in addition to giving us 3 for the out years. We're going to share a playground area, and they're giving us the land. We don't know exactly what all that means when it comes down to the bottom line number. So there's this estimate here with X's, is because we're actually going down at the end of October to get a more precise number. And DFCM, again, is working to get the CBE done, the actual cost analysis and estimate, to present to the legislature. And so this is more of a placeholder, because we will have an IFR for your next meeting prepared for you, but we weren't able to get the number yet, because a lot of this developed during the process of moving our portable to St. George, when that district was saying, this is not going to work for you in the long term. We can Band-Aid this for a couple of years, but after that, you need a real facility here, and we're happy to have you be part of our district with this, essentially. So that's the setup there, board members, and that's exciting to me, because it sounds like a really good way to partner and build a building at a better cost to the taxpayers.
Superintendent Coleman, thank you for the briefing. I'm not seeing any questions or comments. I'm sure in our next meeting, as those X's change to numbers, then that will we'll probably have a few more questions, but we appreciate the briefing. The next item that we have on here is an actionable item, and how I'm seeing it, yeah. Is that right? So are you taking point on this and introducing everyone's superintendent? This is on the USAMAC, the funding, the 2023 funding request.
Oh, yeah, maybe I can just do a brief intro, and then I'll let Superintendent Patton take over. USIMAC, as you know, is housed at USDB, but it's really a board initiative. This is the state agency, Utah State Instructional Materials Access Center, that it really runs under the direction of the board through Leah Voorhees, because this is the group that provides the Braille and large print and all the accessible materials for students throughout the state who are visually impaired or blind. And so we take care of the employment, we give them space on the campus, and so technically they're there, and the board and the legislature have asked us to present their needs through USDB, but they kind of independently answer to you as a board in that way. And so Armando, who is the director of that USIMAC, works very closely with Leah and the folks there at the board office. So Superintendent Patton, do you have anything to add before you present that?
Not really. This is Superintendent Patton, and I just want to introduce Armando. He is here. We've experienced some complications this year that we haven't necessarily in the past, as everybody has, so he will explain those and explain what the needs are. So go ahead, Armando.
Armando, hang on, we'll get your mic on. The light is on.
Okay, these are different than when I was here before, so it's good to be before you again. Armando Venegas, I'm the director of the Utah State Instructional Materials Access Center. We are located at USDB, and as already said, we do procure and also produce accessible textbooks and related material for schools, for students who are blind or visually impaired throughout the state of Utah. So over the last couple of years, we've had one-time funding, and that was actually in response to a study that was completed in 2015, even prior to before I became the director there. And what we have done since then is we have hired and expanded our certified staff, which is certified transcribers, certified proofreaders. Transcribers take a textbook and they translate it into Braille, raised dots, along with all the formatting that's in the textbook and all the different pieces of a textbook. That is a huge process. For a transcriber to get certified, it usually takes about 18 months for initial certification, and then thereafter, every 1 or 2 years, they can go on to further certification. The first certification is literary, and literary means maybe a novel or a very simple textbook with no complications. But once you get into the more complicated areas of biology, AP physics, you can imagine that those textbooks are much more difficult, and an initial certified transcriber is incapable of transcribing those until they have further certifications as they go further. So what we do is we also hire contract staff. The contract staff is throughout the United States, and we hire them to help us with the areas that we cannot complete yet. We also purchase books throughout the state. There are different agencies, nonprofits and for-profit agencies that offer textbooks in the required format, or they can produce it for us. Another issue to think about is that as we create these textbooks, one textbook, I'm talking maybe just a regular high school biology textbook, can be upwards of $30,000 to $40,000 just for one textbook. So that's very different than procuring a textbook for a student who is visual and does not need Braille or does not need large print or some other type of accessible format. So we have hired, we actually doubled our staff in the last 3 years, and right now, after looking at how things have happened, now the last 2 years have been just crazy enough with COVID and the addition this year of a lot of teacher-created material, because I believe a lot of districts, LEAs, are looking at trying to go to a more digital or online format in case they have to teach online again. And so a lot of our material went from textbooks to online material, which is something that we did not necessarily anticipate. Online material have other complications just because there's no cohesiveness to them. They could be PowerPoints, they could be PDFs, they could be Word documents and what have you that a teacher creates, and it just makes it very difficult to have continuity in that curriculum. We are addressing it, however, and we are sending out books ahead of time to the students. I know some books, some of the volumes have been late, and we have discussed that with the particular TVIs and districts. Many times it's because the orders themselves were late. Other times it's because there were other complications with vendors or with our own staff having to isolate and quarantine and things like that. So here we are. I am asking for $905,000. I have discussed this with Susan Patton, with Superintendent Joel Coleman, and also with Uea Voorhees. And we all agree this is what is necessary to keep production going for our students here in the state of Utah. I know that we're gonna have to take more space there at the at the Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind. Superintendent Coleman has graciously offered to accommodate that. And so with this additional team that I have included in the requirements, the additional production team, we will then be able to fully meet all the orders that we have. With textbooks and material, we are still looking at how we can address as a state, together with Uea Voorhees and other LEAs and TVIs throughout the state. Teacher created material is another issue, only because that is normally done at the local level with the TVI or other Braille assistant. They're at the LEA. However, not every LEA has that possibility. Some have lost their transcribers to other districts or to other states. And so at any rate, when that happens, we have to pick up the slack because we are available to the whole state of Utah, to all the LEAs, charter schools, and in districts. There's no cost to the districts. They do have to sign an MOU, but there is no cost to the districts as far as having to partner with us with funding. With that said, yeah.
I've got one question, Director, and well, I've got actually two. One is in the purpose and justification. I think it's well said, but let's just say this moves forward. There's no question as we go before the legislature that they're going to say, is there a metrics or something that says there's this volume increase? What has changed in that environment? Are you guys have any matrix or a way to say to be able to respond to, we have this increase of demand here, or we foresee an increase of the demand?
Yes, the increase is twofold. One is the increase in volume and demand, but the other increase is the increase in difficulty, meaning that we sometimes in the bigger districts, they have their own TVIs that will work with the younger students in the first, second, third, fourth grade. But once they start getting into middle school and high school, those students transfer over to us because the books become more difficult. So that's when we see a lot of the influx of textbooks from some of the districts that have their own TVIs or traditionally have had their own TVIs. This year we actually, or the state special ed office added a question to all districts if they're going to be using or will be using USIMAX services. All but 3 districts said yes. That doesn't mean that all of them have students that are qualified, but that does scare me a little bit because if everyone did jump in at the same time, it would be impossible to actually meet their demand. So based on that need where districts are asking to be or are letting us know that they will be joining and sending material over to us, we need to get prepared for that as well.
Okay. And the other question I have is in the performance measures and outcomes, the last bullet, USIMAC will retain its ability to meet budgetary obligations. I'm looking through here and I'm a little bit confused on the budgetary piece.
Correct.
Of this. Is this a lack of budget or what what obligations on the
So-
budgetary side? Usually you would hire some accountants and some other people if you can't keep up with the budget.
No, I don't think that's worded
Is that-
correctly. But what I think what we're trying to say there is that right now we have increased our staff and we are training our staff. And if we were to at least not get partially funded for some of this request, then we would have to look into somehow finding money elsewhere, either through one-time funds or decreasing staff, which would be which would not be
And I
something we would
have
want.
I would have asked this earlier, but I saw it late last night, and I'm like, I'm not going to go start emailing
Yeah.
the slate. Is there any other questions? Yes, Vice Chair Davis.
I have a motion if you're ready, Chair.
Beg your pardon?
I have a motion if you're ready.
Okay, yeah.
I move that the board approves the $905,000 ongoing funding request, and I'd like to speak to the motion.
Well, let's get a second. Is there a second?
Second.
Second? Okay, speak to the motion.
I think there's a timing issue here also. And, you know, when I have heard from a variety of folks in the secondary space, in particular, when these texts get more complex, you know, our students in some of our typically developing peers in schools want to access information and they get it. And our students who have, you know, a sight impairment have to wait for it to be created. And it takes time and there's a lag. And I think there's a real access to information issue and a timing issue, and I support the motion.
Okay, Member Hanson?
Yeah, thank you. Just a question. I understand this is the model that we've used for a long time, but when we provide information or services, products for free, sometimes they don't get used efficiently or most efficiently. I'm wondering if that might be a model that we want to explore where we actually charge for the services. And then what about not only in-state but out-of-state? Is there a market for this? I mean, we've got this whole operation set up. It's awesome what we're doing.
Yeah.
But could we get money from the LEAs and maybe make things more efficiently? We'll also prompt them to order things early if they're paying for it and can see what this costs. I think that the market might drive us to be more efficient. Just a thought from me. I appreciate any comments you have.
Yes.
Could I speak to that, and then you can follow up,
right.
because you're the expert here. This is Susan Patton. We have, there's a couple of issues. It's so large and complex, and me just being the first this last year, I was really amazed at the complexity of USIMAC and as far as the services that are rendered, but also the lack of the lack of ongoing support for this. One of the problems that we're having, like Armando said, is a teacher-created material that they're getting and they need a week's turnaround for. So that speaks to Board Member Davis as far as what's happening there. The other thing is we do out of state. We we can accept that, and they can pay us for contract with us to Braille what they're in need of. That's not happening a lot because we don't have the time to do it. We don't have the time nor the staff to do it. The other part of that is we're getting textbooks and things that we can Braille and are very good at Brailing and getting back, and we might not get that in the time frame that's asked for, but we're still trying to we know that the TVIs are working hard to get that information as well. So it's kind of the classroom teacher might say, I need this in 3 months. Well, it's really difficult. And the last thing I wanted to say was that Armando's group might Braille an entire textbook. Well, the curriculum might change, because the deadline is April 1st to get that textbook ready to go for the next fall. And as we all know, curriculums change until fall. And so then we're in trouble because we've got a curriculum change. So Armando, go ahead and speak to that more.
Yeah, just to clarify about the outside. So we do accept orders from outside at a very limited basis. Just those files that we have created that we are sure the quality is 100%. And that we can reprint in a fraction of the time. And then we charge basically just what it costs us, not really much overhead, because it's more of a service to other states and other districts. if we were going to take an order and then start from ground zero and create the whole thing, that would be a different story because the costs there are astronomical. One other thing I wanted to mention is that we have an enormous amount of files of each Braille file is really large, and there's a lot of tactile graphic files as well. And so right now we're doubling our server space, and also for redundancy purposes, we're bringing over a server to Salt Lake so that we don't lose any of those, because losing a file means you could lose $30,000 in one instant. So we just can't afford to do that in taxpayer money. But yeah, hopefully that answers a little bit your question.
I have an answer to Board Member Hanson's question as well.
Okay, Superintendent Coleman.
I'll be brief. He is right on, and through the years we have actually had a subscription service before where they had to pay a certain amount, but what we found statewide is that what they were doing is they were not ordering the materials that the blind children needed to save money. And that's why about 3 years ago, the board supported us in saying, let's make it available to everyone, find out what the kids really need. And now, of course, that's created the need for producing those materials. And so his point is well taken, and we did come from that kind of a model to where we are now.
You have a follow-up?
And that maybe addressed the follow-up that I had. I just didn't hear a clean answer on why we're not doing this as more of a for-profit kind of, especially out-of-state for-profit. But where money is changing hands, I think that prompts people to look at when they need to order, look at what they really need, not change curriculum if they've invested money in these books that are coming out. I mean, a lot of these questions and issues, it sounds like, could be addressed if we had the normal flow of things that happen in a textbook situation. And I mean, you guys are the experts. You've done this for a long time. But looking at this, I think there may be a more efficient way that we could do it that would put some money in. Instead of just asking for money every year, we could get some money coming into the coffers through the services we're providing. Because these are unusual services. They're not provided by a lot of places in the States. I think there would be a big demand if we wanted to go out and market it.
Okay, I'm not seeing any discussion. The motion before the board is that the board approves the $905,000 ongoing funding request. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting passes unanimously. We're to our annual report, and we'll have the Associate Superintendent of the Blind, Susan Patton, you're going first.
The Superintendent Tanner is going to go first because the deaf schools is
Okay.
before mine. So go ahead, Michelle.
Michelle Tanner.
Can I ask a question? Can I interrupt here and ask a question? We seem to
Yeah.
be way over time.
I was wondering
We want
that
to be
too.
conscious of the board's time. And so let us know if you need us to shorten this report or postpone it.
I was going to say we certainly could postpone it.
Let's postpone it because this is a really good report. So without objection, we'll remove this from, it's an informational item, not actionable, and we'll make sure we have plenty of time in our next meeting. Yes.
If you do have access to it, please feel free to email us and ask us questions. We're more than happy to answer those questions in the meantime.
Thank you. 3.6, Superintendent Coleman, your superintendency report.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just want to report on one thing today, and that is that the COVID, just update on COVID. We did have one small class that had to go online learning for 2 weeks, but other than that, we've been doing pretty well. So if anyone asks you, you've heard it from us straight. We're not getting anywhere close to thresholds for test to stay or anything like that, like a couple other schools around the state have had to do. We're continuing teacher licensing discussions, and of course, you've got that on your docket for Law and Licensing Committee tomorrow. And an update on the buildings real quickly. We're waiting for supplies to come in, and then the doors and pads for the walls. But then our JMS little gym remodel project will be finished. You heard about the St. George remodel. And the Mill Creek Portable has been delayed due to the weather things that happened and other things, but we're still keeping our fingers crossed that by the end of October, that will be in place. So that's my That's my superintendent report for this month.
Any questions for the superintendent? Seeing none, thank you, and thank you for joining us by Zoom, and thank you, USDB staff. We look forward to those presentations in the next round. Thank you. Board members, we're going to take a 5-minute break. When we come back in, we're going to get into our board business. I'm going to change the agenda a little bit. So while we're on our break, if we can have the education highlight get prepared, we're going to go to that first, and then we'll go back into our agenda. 5-minute break. Thank you.